Joining us now, Congressman, Republican 1st District, Dr. Rob Wittman. Good to have you, sir.
John, great to be with you this morning.
Okay, lots to talk about. Let's start number one, sir. Then we're going to get into your personal situation. But let's start with Trump saves 1,000 carrier jobs. Now, friends, and I say that tongue-in-cheek because they're not necessarily my friends, but associates at the Heritage Foundation and Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska and these other Petri dish conservative purists, as I call them, saying that, well, it was corporate welfare, it was a giveaway, etc. all. Tell that to the 1,000 families in December on Christmas that have their jobs now maintained at Carrier. Who's going to tell them that this was corporate welfare? What did you make of that deal?
Well, John, I thought it was exactly what needs to be done, and it's what Donald Trump has said he would do. He was going to and is, as we see, going to protect American jobs. Now, I think he's going to do a lot more than just what happened with Carrier. You know, I think he's going to get a lot more aggressive about how he puts in place policies for American companies, both in how they produce jobs and maintain jobs here, and also how they transact their products here. I think all of those things are exactly what need to be put in place as far as policy. But I think also that you will find, in order to be effective, you have to use a combination of both the carrot and the stick. And I think in this particular situation, for Carrier, obviously there were some tax considerations that were given to them, but also I think a conversation with Mr. Trump and the CEO there to say, hey, by the way, things are going to change. You're going to find a very different regulatory atmosphere here in the United States. You're going to find a big change in tax policy. Stay here. Hang in there with us. We're going to make significant changes that will have positive impacts on your businesses. So I think, again, a combination of those to say, hey, let's change the regulatory atmosphere. Let's make sure that we are more friendly to business. And let's make sure, too, we bring down that corporate tax rate. Let's make sure, too, that if you are going to specifically move away jobs, I do think that there has to be a look at how our policy deals with that. You know, how do we want to incentivize, but how do we also want to make sure, too, that there's a downside if you're going to be moving jobs away, especially if you expect to move those jobs away and still transact major amounts of your business here in the United States. Now, if your business is moving somewhere else and that's where your markets are, you can understand. But if you just want to move the jobs out, yet still want to have the markets here in the United States, I do think that does beg at least a discussion about what should the policy be to make sure that we are, again, preserving jobs in America and preserving the American economy.
No, look, you're 100% right. And one of the things that President-elect Trump tweeted out over the weekend was that, look, if you're a company and you're thinking about shipping jobs overseas, and this is exactly what he said the day he announced for president all the way back in May of 2015. If you're going to think about manufacturing and taking jobs out of the U.S. into another country and then shipping your products back in order to take advantage of the globalist slave trade cheap labor network, then I'm going to go to Congress and I'm going to ask for a 35% tariff to put on your stuff that you're making there coming back into the United States. And that basically evens it out, because then companies have to say, well, if I ship my jobs down there and I have to pay 35% in a tax to come back into the U.S., it doesn't make any sense. I might as well keep the jobs in the U.S. and pay the U.S. workers. So I don't think that President Trump, when he takes office, is going to hesitate to go to Congress, and you'll be there perhaps, and say, look, I need a system of tariffs, because as you said, it's a carrot and a stick. The tariffs would be the stick, right?
Yes. Yeah, John, I believe that's exactly the way to go about doing it. And once you do that, too, and you send a clear message to businesses here, but also businesses around the world that, hey, you know, America's back open for business. We're going to lower that corporate tax rate. We're going to cut back on the realm of regulations, and it shouldn't just be regulatory reform. It has to be regulatory reduction. And he's already said things like the 2-for-1 plan, which I'm a co-sponsor of that bill in Congress. It says for every one new regulation, you have to take 2 off the books. I mean,
right.
That's the kind of signal that you send to folks, not only keep businesses here, But, John, think about this. If we make significant reductions to the corporate tax rate in the United States, all of a sudden now we're competitive with other nations.
Right.
And we can produce goods and services here, I think, better than anybody else in the world. All you have to do is to make sure we level the playing field on the regulatory and tax realm, and we can compete with anybody, regardless of the labor rates, because of the quality of our workforce here. So we can do that. Trump gets that. He's going to level that playing field. I think he's going to have a great partnership there with Congress in getting those things done, and I'm excited about seeing those things unfold here in the months to come.
Let's get to foreign policy. Let's get to start with Taiwan. President-elect Trump having a conversation with the Taiwanese president over the weekend. Apparently this was planned for some time. Trump saying, I don't really care what China says. We pay them hundreds of millions of dollars to buttress their economy and for their defense also. And I'm going to pick up the phone and have a dialogue with them. And too bad if China's mad. What say you?
I say the president is spot on. I have gone to Taiwan to visit. As you know, the Chinese hate that when members of Congress go to Taiwan and visit. But I went there because, as you said, Taiwan is a trading partner in the United States. We have a strategic relationship with her. I went there and met with their military leaders. I met with their civilian government. It is, I think, critical for any leader of the United States to reach out and to meet and talk with Taiwan. Now, I understand China's assertions about Taiwan being a runaway satellite, as they like to term it. But I can tell you, John, if you're going to be effective from a foreign policy standpoint, and you're going to make sure that you stand up to China, I think that's something that has to happen. And for all the fraud out there from folks that said, this is counter to diplomatic protocol. I think Donald Trump has it right. The Chinese don't seem to care about diplomatic protocol when it comes to militarizing the South China Sea or their other actions in the region, or not doing anything to help in at least paring back Kim Jong-un's aggressive behavior in North Korea. They only want to do things to their convenience. I do think it's reasonable and thoughtful public policy to at least have dialogue with the leaders there in Taiwan. It just makes sense. If you're going to have an aggressive and comprehensive foreign policy, you have to do that.
No question. Okay, let's get to, over the weekend, the Obama administration announced that they are not now in favor of withdrawing troops from Iraq after, or whatever presence we have there, militarily advisors, if you will, from Iraq after ISIS is driven out of Iraq. The Obama administration saying that we're going to have to maintain a military presence in Iraq going forward in the future, almost like it sounded like in perpetuity. Of course, the irony of this is, as you know, Dr. Wittman, is about 8 years ago today, when Obama was preparing to take office, he got one of the basic campaign promises he has is that he would remove our military presence from Iraq totally. 8 years later, and now he's totally reversed his position based on reality. What do you make of the whole thing?
Well, I think some of it is political expediency in his positions earlier on. He had made a commitment to say, hey, listen, we're going to pull out of there. He didn't aggressively pursue a status of forces agreement with Iraq, which he should have. If we had done that, we would have a status of forces agreement, I believe, and our forces could have continued there. We would not have had ISIS grow into what it grew into. We would not have had the magnitude of the problem that we face today. And I think strategically you do have to question, how do we make sure there's some stability in that area? And remember, too, in the absence of any kind of essence of government there in Iraq, Iran continues to be stronger and stronger and stronger. And now with the administration entering into this Iran deal, what they've done is they have made Iran now the power to be in the Middle East. And they understand, too, that if they have a weak and fragmented Iraq, that is exactly what Iran wants. So by their own doing, they've done that, and they know the only way to counter that is to have some kind of presence in Iraq. Iraq, I don't think is going to end up in the long run, John, being constructed the way it is today. I think you'll have to allow the Kurds and Kurdistan to independently govern that area, for them to be in charge of their own security there, and then come up with some framework to allow Shias and Sunnis to, in strong regional governments, rule the central area of the country, and then have some sort of centralized government there. I'm not sure what that would look like, but certainly where they are right now is not any semblance of a strong central government there in Iraq. And of course, they're doing all they can just to do things like retake Mosul. And I don't know that they have the wherewithal, not just to retake that, but to maintain that, which is going to be, under constant pressure from groups like ISIS. And if it's not ISIS, it'll be some other extremist group there. So the reality of what we face in the region, I think, is a product of failed foreign policy, and it's where we are today. And if we're to have any chance of having some kind of stability in that region, yes, we're going to have some sort of presence in the United States there. It's going to have to be not just us, but other partners in the world to come in there along with us to make sure there's some stability strategically in that area.
What a mess, right? At the bottom line, the whole thing is just an absolute mess.
And it's a mess of this administration's doing. It's failed foreign policy on the front end, where if they'd done the right things on the front end, we would not be nearly where we are today. Now, there would still be some challenges there, but I think if you add this up, no aggressive effort for status of forces agreement, almost wanting to get out of there, and then on top of this failed Iranian deal, we have made the Middle East a less safe place there, and one that's going to take extraordinary effort from a lot of different countries, including Arab countries in that region, to make sure it stays stable.
It's just an horrific situation to think. First of all, there's no reason we ever should have gone in there, in my view, ever. That's a separate dialogue that we can have on another day, but now we're stuck there for what seems like in perpetuity. Same thing with Afghanistan, but that, of course, we had no little choice there. I want to get Congressman Wittman to your personal situation. I know you're under consideration for the chairman of the House Armed Services Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee. That's a mouthful. And you've met with, I know, chairman from Texas. How do we stand on that?
Well, John, we're continuing to look at all these particular details. I tell folks I'm very interested in how folks, around the 1st District and around the state feel. So I've been on the phone for the last week or so talking to folks, as well as the leadership in the House, as well as Vice President-elect Pence. Mike's a good friend, and I'm talking to him about the things that are unfolding. John, there's a great opportunity there for us, I say us as a Republican House and Congress, to work with President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Pence to do some major things to really move this country in the right direction. And I want to make sure that I am in the right place to do the maximum amount of good, and that is to serve in the greatest capacity. So I am having conversations with folks across the spectrum about, what should be the path forward. And it's not about Rob Wittman. It's about, how do folks in the 1st District, how do folks in Virginia feel about where I can best serve? Where can I best serve the Commonwealth? So we are having those conversations, and we are getting close to a point where we're going to make the decision about, which track is best for Virginia and where can I best serve. And we'll be doing that here in the days to come. So I promise to all the folks out there, this is not something that's going to linger on. We've been having great conversations with folks and trying to solidify where we're going and what direction we need to take, again, in the best interest of Virginia.
So, Congressman, are you going to make this decision by the 2016 Republican Party of Virginia advance, which commences on Friday, December 9th, at the end of this week? Is it fair to say you'll have a decision by then?
I think it's fair to say that's our intent, is to have a decision out, is to communicate to folks. I do not want to go to the advance and be, wavering back and forth and this, that, and the other. I owe it to folks to make sure that we make a definitive and direct decision. So, yes, our intent is to have a decision before the advance.
And it would be a fair assumption for me to make that if you are offered the chairman of the House Armed Services Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee, which is a very key slot on the House Armed Services Committee, that you would likely not be able to take that chairmanship and be a candidate for governor. Is that a likely assumption I can make?
Well, John, I've talked to a lot of people about that, about how I could properly try to do both. I've talked to Chairman Thornberry, I've talked to Speaker Ryan, I've talked to a number of others there, as well as folks across the state who have been very, very helpful and supportive of my run for governor, and asking them, their ideas on it. I've gotten a wide variety of viewpoints. There are responsibilities, I think, that go with both if you're going to do both of those jobs the right way. I would say this: the opinions that I've gotten from people have been very direct about what they believe can be done in both realms. And as you know, John, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out. It's running for governor is a Herculean task to travel around the state, but also there's a great amount of responsibility and time that it takes to be that subcommittee chairman. The question is a simple math problem. Are there enough hours in the day to do justice to both? And I think from that standpoint, if you're really going to do both the way that you need to, it would be difficult. Now, that being said, the Speaker came out the other day and said that there will not be any decisions made on subcommittee chairman until January. So there's not going to be anything definitive that's out there. Now, I've had discussions with folks, but there's not going to be a formal appointment of any subcommittee chairman prior to January 4th, which is when we go back into session and the members get sworn in. So I'm going to have to make a decision prior to that, just looking at the scenarios. But that's what I'm looking at, and that's what I've talked to folks. And I want to make sure, in whatever capacity I'm pursuing, that I'm doing the best job possible, and not try to do two things without my full capability to do the best job possible.
All right, we're out of time, and I appreciate that very thorough explanation, Dr. Wittman. And as President-elect Donald Trump said the night that Hillary conceded at 3 a.m., boy, this politics is a complicated business, right?
It is that. There's always lots of moving parts.
All right, I got to roll. We'll see you at the advance. We'll look forward to your decision. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network.